What if the darkest corners of the human mind were not places to fear, but doors to deeper understanding? What if our guilt, our madness, our suffering, and even our capacity for evil were not signs of weakness, but keys to transformation? Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul, believed that within every person lives both an angel and a demon. His novels are not just stories, they are laboratories of the psyche where characters are pushed to their limits, revealing truths that still unsettle and inspire us today. Decades later, Carl Jung gave us the psychological language to understand these same truths: the shadow, the unconscious, the individuation process. Together, Dostoevsky and Jung offer us a map of the mind, one that does not shy away from darkness, but teaches us to walk through it toward the light. This journey is not for the faint of heart. We will confront guilt, madness, freedom, suffering, and finally, redemption. Along the way, we'll ask questions that echo in our own lives. What do we hide from ourselves? What happens when we deny our shadow? How do we turn pain into meaning? But this is not just a lecture, it is a conversation. I want to hear your voice. As you listen, ask yourself, which part of Dostoevsky's vision speaks most to my life? Where do I see my own shadow? Share your reflections in the comments, because each perspective adds to the depth of this journey. Stay with us, and together we'll explore not only the psychology of Dostoevsky and Jung, but the psychology of ourselves. When Dostoevsky created Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, he was not merely inventing a character. It was mapping the fragile landscape of human guilt. Raskolnikov's crime is not simply the act of taking a life, it is an experiment with his own conscience. He convinces himself that he belongs to a higher category of men, entitled to transgress moral boundaries. Yet once the act is done, the weight of guilt begins to erode his very sense of self. The murder becomes less about the victim and more about the inner torment of the murderer. Dostoevsky understood that guilt is not an external punishment imposed by society, but a relentless voice that grows within. Raskolnikov's fever, paranoia, and eventual confession illustrate how the human mind cannot escape the confrontation with its own darkness. In this sense, Dostoevsky was not only a novelist, but a psychologist of the soul, long before psychology had its modern language. Carl Jung later offered a framework for this torment. He called it the confrontation with the shadow, the hidden, repressed aspects of the self that the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. For Raskolnikov, the shadow was his pride, his desire for power, his belief that he could stand above morality. Yet once unleashed, the shadow turned into a prison, forcing him to face the parts of himself he had denied. This is why Dostoevsky's work remains timeless. It shows us that guilt is not a weakness, but an invitation to self-knowledge. In Jungian terms, to acknowledge the shadow is the first step toward individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Raskolnikov's descent into guilt and eventual confession becomes a parable. True freedom is not the absence of moral law, but the acceptance of our own darkness and the courage to redeem it. In Dostoevsky's world, madness is never just a medical condition, it is a mirror reflecting the hidden depths of the human soul. His characters often fall into delirium, fever, or obsessive thought, not merely as symptoms of illness, but as doorways into the unconscious. Madness, for him, strips away the mask of civility and reveals what lies beneath: desire, fear, cruelty, but also vulnerability and truth. Carl Jung would later call this encounter the meeting with the shadow. The shadow is everything within us that we reject, repress, or deny: our aggression, envy, selfishness, even our forbidden passions. When left unacknowledged, the shadow grows restless, breaking through in dreams, irrational behavior, or moments of despair. Dostoevsky seemed to intuit this long before psychology gave it a name. His characters descend into a chaos that is not meaningless, but profoundly revelatory. Think of Ivan Karamazov and the brothers Karamazov, haunted by visions of the devil. To the outside world, this is madness, but symbolically it is his shadow taking form, demanding recognition. Madness becomes a revelation. What is hidden must be faced. The refusal to confront the shadow often leads to destruction. The courage to face it can become the seed of transformation. For Dostoevsky and Jung alike, the lesson is clear: darkness is not our enemy, but our unacknowledged companion. The question is not whether we have a shadow, but whether we dare to confront it. And this is why their ideas remain so powerful today, because each of us carries unspoken fears and denied truths. Exploring them is not a path to despair, but a step toward authenticity. If this journey through the darkest corners of the mind resonates with you, stay with us. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and join this ongoing exploration of Dostoevsky, Jung, and the psychology that still speaks to our time. Few questions cut as deeply into the human condition as the one Dostoevsky posed in The Brothers Karamazov. If God does not exist, is everything permitted? With this haunting inquiry, he exposed the fragile line between freedom and destruction. Freedom for Dostoevsky was not only a gift, it was a burden. It carried the terrifying possibility that human beings, left without moral or spiritual anchors, could descend into chaos. Even Karamazov embodies this tension. His rebellion against God is not shallow atheism, but a desperate struggle with the unbearable suffering of the innocent. Yet, in rejecting higher order, he becomes vulnerable to inner disorder. His visions of the devil, his unraveling mind, symbolize what happens when freedom becomes detached from responsibility. Carl Jung would describe this in archetypal terms: the figure of the trickster, a chaotic force that dwells within every psyche. The trickster is clever, playful, and destructive, delighting in breaking rules and overturning order. Left unchecked, it sabotages our lives, turning freedom into self-destruction. But when acknowledged, it becomes a source of creativity, innovation, and renewal. Dostoevsky's genius was to show that the battle between good and evil is not only fought in society or theology, it is fought within each human soul. Freedom is both our greatest power and our greatest risk. To embrace it without awareness is to fall into chaos. To embrace it with humility is to transform it into meaning. This tension remains as urgent today as it was in Dostoevsky's time. How do we balance our freedom with our responsibility to ourselves and to others? How do we recognize the trickster within us without letting it destroy us? If these questions intrigue you, stay connected with our channel. We'll continue to explore the dialogue between Dostoevsky and Jung, uncovering truths that can illuminate your own inner journey. Don't forget to subscribe and share your reflections We're building this exploration together. For Dostoevsky, suffering was never meaningless pain. It was the crucible through which the human soul could be purified. His characters stumble, fall, and endure unbearable torments, yet it is precisely through their suffering that they are transformed. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov's punishment is not the prison itself, but the agonizing path of guilt, shame, and eventual confession. Only through this descent does he begin to rise toward redemption. Carl Jung would see in this pattern the archetype of the hero's journey. The hero does not conquer through avoidance of pain, but through immersion in it. There is always a symbolic death of pride, illusion, or ego before the possibility of rebirth. Suffering becomes the initiation into a deeper self, a confrontation with the very core of human existence. Dostoevsky insisted that true redemption is not found in abstract theories or intellectual brilliance, but in compassion, humility, and the willingness to love despite despair. The most broken figures in his novels often become the most radiant because they discover meaning through suffering. Jung echoed this. The path of individuation requires us to face our wounds, not hide them. To integrate our pain is to integrate our humanity. In our own lives, we often try to escape suffering, treating it as failure or misfortune. But Dostoevsky and Jung remind us that suffering, when faced consciously, can open doors to transformation. It is not about glorifying pain, but about discovering what it reveals, our strength, our vulnerability, and our capacity for growth. If you've ever wondered how your struggles could hold hidden meaning, this is the journey we are exploring together. Follow our channel, join the discussion, and let's uncover how Dostoevsky and Jung still guide us through the storms of the human soul. At the heart of both Dostoevsky's novels and Jung's psychology lies the same paradox. The human being is both light and darkness, capable of cruelty and compassion, despair and transcendence. To deny this duality is to live in illusion. To embrace it is to begin the long path toward wholeness. Dostoevsky's characters never remain simple, figures of good or evil. They are torn, contradictory, restless. Raskolnikov is both murderer and seeker of truth. Ivan Karamazov is both brilliant and broken. Prince Mishkin, the idiot, embodies both naivety and a kind of saintly wisdom. Each of them shows us that the human soul cannot be reduced to one dimension. It is always a battlefield of opposing forces. Jung gave language to this struggle, individuation. To individuate is not to become perfect, but to become whole. It means confronting the shadow without being consumed by it, integrating suffering without surrendering to despair, and discovering meaning in the chaos of freedom. This is not an abstract theory, it is a practical path. Each of us carries unacknowledged fears, unresolved wounds, and untapped strengths. To face them honestly is to begin the journey toward authenticity. The meeting point between Dostoevsky and Jung is clear. True psychology is not about escaping the darkness, but about learning to walk through it with awareness. Redemption does not erase suffering, but transforms it into wisdom. As we close this exploration, remember that these ideas are not confined to books or theories. They are lived out in your own daily choices, struggles, and relationships. If you found value in this journey through Dostoevsky and Jung, Stay with us. Subscribe, share your insights, and help build a community of seekers willing to face the depths of the human soul. The map of the darkest mind is also the map to the light within.